if you're hearing something that's just outrageous, just know, in the state of Florida, none of that stuff would ever fly. So you don't have to worry about that. FEMA is not leading this show. We are leading this show here in the state of Florida.
Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, of course. FEMA is not running the show. The state of Florida is running the show. So forget about it. Don't even talk to me. You know, the storm, even according to the phony baloney corruptniks at the Washington Post, was not the horrible, terrible weather event, thankfully, that had been feared and or projected by the government of the United States of America and our weather service. That we have these satellites up in space. Thank you, patriarchy, showing the giant blob as it came across the Gulf of Mexico from the Yucatan Peninsula. Did you notice that that giant storm brushed across the Yucatan Peninsula, a good portion of it, and nobody reported a thing about that? I don't know if anybody was killed, if any resort hotels were wiped out, if, boogie boards and surfboards were swept out to sea. They don't cover that because it's only Mexico. It's the Yucatan. It's full of American tourists, but never mind that. They don't even cover that. But you may recall the coverage the last few days, which was, I think it would be generous to say, quite hysterical, as it so often is. Hurricane Milton could be the worst storm to hit Florida in 100 years. That's the headline from ABC 7 in New York, the biggest storm to hit in 100 years. That's it's a once-in-a-lifetime storm. It's the biggest storm that anybody's ever seen, which is not true, of course. And then NBC News, NBC fake news, they have the headline, Hurricane Milton's downpour around Tampa Bay was a 1-in-1,000-year rain event. It was a 1-in-1,000-year rain event. Now, did the, who is it, the Seminole Indians, did they keep good records on rain events for 1,000 years with no written language? How did they do that? They didn't have cable television, did they? Did they have 24-hour Weather Channel stuff? I don't think they did. But there it is, NBC Network News, that the Hurricane Milton downpour around Tampa Bay was a 1-in-1,000-year rain event. Wow, that's more, if I'm not mistaken, that's more than a 1-in-100-year event, isn't it? Now, look, it was a serious storm, and we have at least 14 people that were killed, and I saw a report of 17 people confirmed killed. It was a big hurricane, and hurricanes can be fatal and lethal and very, very destructive, and there were tornadoes that came along with it. And, do you know that the United States of America has more tornadoes than every other country in the world combined? Not just more than Brazil or more than Russia. We have more tornadoes in the United States than all of the other countries in the world combined any given year. Pretty amazing stuff. But they got the news media and government agencies like the National Weather Service and so on. The 1,000-year event, NBC News. The 100-year event, ABC News. Well, let's go now to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who we started with there a couple of moments ago. And let's go to Governor, because I was watching the television yesterday. It was right there on the television, on the Jumbotron at home. And Governor Ron DeSantis was briefing. And let me just say, the guy is solid. He is, and he's had a chance to demonstrate that over the last couple of weeks now, really. And he is just steady as a rock. He's very good. And he blows off the stupidity and brushes back the idiot reporters. But let's go. He had a press conference yesterday, unlike Kamala Harris, who did not have a press conference yesterday because she is dim of wit. But let's go to Ron DeSantis because somebody said, well, this is the biggest storm in the history of the world. It's 1,000 years. It's, going halfway back to Christ, but 1,000 years ago there was a bigger rainstorm. Is that right? I'm beginning to think they make a lot of this stuff up. What do you think? Here's Ron DeSantis on and he starts talking barometric pressure, which is one of the one of the indicators of the severity of a storm, and it's one of the metrics that is used when how bad was it? And you start talking barometric pressure. And Ron DeSantis, he's talking barometric pressure like he's with the Weather Channel. He's like, yeah, come on, forget it. I got the barometer on my belt over here. It hangs here like a Swiss Army knife. Look at this. So here's Ron DeSantis talking about the biggest storm ever, which was not in the past week.
How does this storm rate in kind of the history of storms? I think it hit with a barometric pressure of, what was it, about 950 millibars when it hit, which I think if you go back to 1851, there's probably been 27 hurricanes that have had lower so the lower the barometric pressure, the stronger it is. I think there have been about 27 hurricanes that have had lower barometric pressure on landfall than Milton did. And of those, 17 occurred, I think, prior to 1960.
Well, that is, I got it. They're not going to invite him onto the Sunday shows to talk about this. This whizzes all over the narrative that they're weaving here, doesn't it? I'm sorry, what we're talking millibars, and this one was about 950 millibars. And the lower the number on the millibars, the more severe. We've had 27 hurricanes since 1851. There were people here that could write stuff down then. Still no internet because Al Gore hadn't been born. But that's another thing. And 17 of those were before 1960, when there was no global warming. The weather was perfect before then because there was no mental illness and hysteria. But since 1851, 27 hurricanes, more severe. And of those, 17 were prior to 1960, which is some time ago now. What is that? That's almost 65 years ago. That's pretty good stuff. And Ron DeSantis, he's rattling this stuff off. And he looked over his shoulder to check with his, emergency weather guy. He's like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got it, because they were talking about it. So, gosh, hang on a minute. I was talking about the most severe hurricanes, the 1900. That's 1900, 124 years ago in Galveston, Texas, where 8,000 to 12,000 people were killed in a single hurricane crashing into Galveston, Texas. They didn't have any satellites warning them about the looming storm coming their way. They didn't even have two-way radios on ships. You could send up a flare, and you figure it out from there. Ron DeSantis yesterday on the severity of hurricanes.
The most powerful hurricane on record since the 1850s in the state of Florida occurred in the 1930s, the Labor Day hurricane. Barometric pressure on that was 892 millibars. It totally wiped out the Keys. We've never seen anything like it, and that remains head and shoulders above any powerful hurricane that we've ever had in the state of Florida. The most deadly hurricane we've ever had was in 1928. The Okeechobee hurricane killed over 4,000 people. Fortunately, we aren't going to have anything close to that on this hurricane.
Now, fortunately, we're not going to have anything close to that on this hurricane. And he talked about this 1930s, it may have been 1930, Labor Day hurricane, which was the biggest whopper. And in fact, there's a great Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall movie with Edward G. Robinson. I like the old movies, called Key Largo. Key Largo is a great movie, 1948. And it is, as you might imagine, it's set in Key Largo, which is in the Florida Keys, right? Not just a Beach Boys song. And the 1948 Key Largo movie, you got Edward G. Robinson. He's a gangster with his bunch of gun-toting gang members, and they're out of Milwaukee, and they're down there. Yeah, Milwaukee, what the heck? And they're down there in Key Largo, and they run into World War II veteran Humphrey Bogart and his best girl, Lauren Bacall, and they're in this inn. Who else is there? Lionel Barrymore, I think, and they're in this house, and there's a hurricane coming. And these guys from Milwaukee, they don't know nothing about no hurricanes, right? And Humphrey Bogart tells Edward G. Robinson, and that's about what hurricanes are and what they can do. And that's based on this 1930 hurricane that ripped through Florida and crushed the place, right? And it's kind of a fun movie, especially in hurricane season. But I like the old movies, so maybe that's just me. Good stuff. But the big hurricanes, and Ron DeSantis is ticking the stuff off like he's a hurricane historian.
I just think people should put this in perspective. They try to take different things that happen with tropical weather and act like it's something. There's nothing new under the sun. This is something that the state has dealt with for its entire history, and it's something that we'll continue to deal with.
How about the Native Americans? Did they deal with hurricanes, or were there no hurricanes? Because they didn't have SUVs, did they? They didn't even have horses. And that means no flatulence. Well, not from horses, anyway. Because it's funny, I was having a conversation on this topic yesterday at Newsmax with some nice people. And there were no horses in North America or in South America or anywhere in the Americas before the Europeans arrived here. The Spanish brought horses to the Americas, to North America and South America, because they liked their horses. So they put them on ships, wooden ships, on the water, very free and easy. Sorry, Stephen Stills song. And that boy, horses really caught on though, didn't they? Because everybody liked them until SUVs came along. It's nice to have a big, luxurious leather seat that's heated and have satellite radio and stuff, thanks to the patriarchy. So, amazing stuff. And Ron DeSantis talking about, and this is something that comes up a lot. Oh, it's the most expensive, the most costly hurricane ever. Well, of course it is. First of all, Biden-Harris inflation would take care of that all by itself. But Ron DeSantis, and more homes were wiped out, and it's more expensive than any hurricane. But that's a dumb metric to use, and this is why.
I think what's changed is we've got 23 million people. A storm that hits is likely to hit more people and property than it would have 100 years ago. And so the potential for that damage has grown. But what's also changed is our ability to do the prevention, to pre-stage the assets. I mean, we never did the pre-staging of power assets until I became governor. Now people expect that, but that wasn't what was done in the past. That's why people would be out with power for 3 weeks when we'd have hurricanes. We thought that that's not good. Now we have to pay to get these guys to come in, but my view is the quicker you get everyone hooked up, the better off the economy is going to be anyway. So why don't we just do that?
Native Americans really didn't even care when their electricity was knocked out during hurricanes. And then a fake news reporter, a dim-witted news reporter, jumped in with the Democrat Party's talking points. The White House issued talking points. What about misinformation? It's like, well, when did we start talking about the election?
Governor, a lot of folks, particularly quite a few who trust you and look to you for information, are possibly engaging in some misinformation about some entity controlling the weather. Can you take this opportunity to denounce that misinformation and set the record straight for folks who believe someone is controlling the weather?
Yeah, she must be talking about Trayon White of the D.C. City Council saying that the Rothschilds control the weather, a Jewish banking family out of Europe, because, I don't know. Now, Ron DeSantis, he gave a straight-up answer to the, I'm sure, perfectly nice young lady. What about this misinformation about people controlling the weather? Also, Marjorie Taylor Greene, member of Congress, tweeted out a prank, a joke. The Democrats control the weather. That's in the Washington Post today, too, as though she was being serious. Ron DeSantis.
Look, if I could control the weather, I would do, 78 and sunny year-round. Now, we get that, a lot in Florida, coming up in the months, but there would be no reason to ever do. So, look, and this is on both sides. You kind of have some people think government can do this, and then others think it's all because of fossil fuels. The reality is what we see, there's precedent for all this in history. Like, it is hurricane season. You are going to have tropical weather.
Why do you think we call it hurricane season, What do you think we get during football season? We get football. And then during hurricane season, it shouldn't come as a complete shock to you that we get hurricanes. Why do you think they call it that? Numbskull.
DC keep talking about we're a resilient city, and that's a model based off the Rothschilds controlling the climate to create natural disasters they can pay for it and own the cities, man. Be careful.
Oh, Lisa, there's no record of a hurricane ever hitting Springfield.
Yes, but the records only go back to 1978 when the Hall of Records was mysteriously blown away.
Fairly typical, I think. Well. Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Hillary Clinton is misinformation of 2024. Our news media, it's like tonight at 11, fake news, fake weather, fake sports. Everywhere you look. Yeah, today in the Washington Post, they say it's going to be 71 degrees in Washington, D.C., but it's going to feel like 71 degrees. That's today's weather. Let's go to the telephones. Let's go to Jay, calling from Fort Myers, Florida. Jay Mobile, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Chris, how you doing? I thought maybe you might want a real update, and I'm not, excuse me, I'm not downplaying hurricanes. I've been through several of them, and they are no joke. But the way that they were talking about this one, it was going to carve a path all the way to Florida and make Florida two completely different things, and that just puts people in a panic, which is really not a good thing. So technically what they're doing is the news media is promoting misinformation, and that's a problem. And because people just get in a panic down here. And yeah, it was bad, and the power went off, and they're doing a job to get everything back, but people survived. And the media's got to stop this nonsense. They really do.
Well, they create panic about the election and about Donald Trump, and he's Hitler, and it's the end of democracy, and then the hurricane, which, hurricanes happen from time to time, is going to be the worst hurricane in 1,000 years, and, the other channel, it's the worst in 100 years, and you're right, it's going to rip a path through central Florida and break it into 2 states, and the peninsula will be sunk. I'm beginning to think, Jay, that we probably shouldn't believe everything the news media tells us. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, the other thing is it sounds like they think Donald Trump is one of the kids from the Boys from Brazil. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, Boys from Brazil is a fun one. It is. That was Gregory Peck. Did you see this bizarro Mayorkas press conference kind of at the White House, but he was probably not at the White House, but they're asking questions from the White House briefing room, and he was asked by Jackie Heinrich of the Fox News Channel, who's just great. Happy to have her at the White House, along with James Rosen, the great James Rosen, who is with Newsmax, and he's at the White House, although the commies there don't call on him every day. And Peter Doocy at Fox News, too. But Jackie Heinrich asked Alejandro Mayorkas, we did this on my TV show last night on Newsmax, 10 p.m. Eastern, The Right Squad, Chris Plant. And Alejandro Mayorkas was asked about this Afghan man, this man from Afghanistan, who was invited into the United States by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on a special visa, and now it turns out he's an ISIS guy, right? He was plotting an attack, and he'd already acquired an assault-style rifle and lots of ammo, and recruited an underage person. I think we don't know whether the underage person is male or female, but planning an election day massacre in the United States of America. And I give credit where credit is due. The FBI got this bad guy and arrested him, and that's a good thing. Now, he's been charged officially. He was arrested a couple of days ago. But Afghan man accused of plotting terror attack. Listen to this, because this is the update, and Alejandro Mayorkas was asked about this yesterday, and he refused to answer. because what do I work for you or something? Yeah, you do. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure if you know how this works. Afghan man charged with election day terror plot. He was screened multiple times, according to our government. The vetting process that the Biden-Harris Democrat administration had in place, which they've assured us again and again, was top-notch. No bad guys are going to get into the country. If you're a terrorist and you want to get into the United States, you're probably going to have to go to Mexico and walk across the open border with all your terrorist friends, and then you can be a terrorist out in the open. And the dim-witted Democrats yesterday, they're focused on the terrorist, the Afghan, waved into the country on a special visa by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris so that he could be a radical Islamic jihadi mass-murdering terrorist and attack us on Election Day, He asked around, and what he did was he looked on the internet to see what states have lax gun laws. And Democrats, this happened on my TV show last night on the Newsmax channel. Well, look, you guys, you Republicans want lax gun laws, and this Afghan terrorist led into the country by Democrats, he was looking to see what states have lax gun laws. And I pointed out at the table last night on Newsmax on the Right Squad at 10 p.m. Eastern, I pointed out, he's on a suicide mission to massacre people in a radical Islamic jihadi attack. I don't think he's going to concern himself with open carry gun laws. He's going to be dead at the end. He doesn't have to worry about the additional minor charges because he's going to be introduced to his 72 raisins. He's going to get 72 raisins after he commits his terror attack. Now, Afghan man charged with Election Day terror plot screened multiple times, and here's the headline, worked CIA security job. Wait a minute. You're telling me that Nasir Ahmad Tawhidi, 27 years old, he arrived in the United States 2021, September 9th of 2021, just a matter of weeks after Joe Biden's and Kamala Harris's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. She was the last one in the room, She liked to brag about her being involved at a very, very important level. So the Afghan man living in Oklahoma who allegedly plotted to conduct a terrorist attack on Election Day on behalf of ISIS. So he has two organizational affiliations, right? And one is ISIS, and the other is the CIA. Now, wait a minute. How can that be? How can he's affiliated with ISIS and that's crazy. How can that be? Well, it can be because Joe Biden and the Democrats let him into the country, and now they're telling us that he was vetted. He was vetted repeatedly. And you know what that tells you is that their vetting process is a donkey show because these guys are good at nothing, okay? And what they're telling us is that we vetted him, and now here's what the Democrats are claiming. This happened on my TV show last night too, with the lib on the show. Said, well, he was probably radicalized online after he got here. Now, why would you make a claim like that? You would make a claim like that to deflect responsibility for their failed vetting process. That's why you would make a fake allegation like that. You would make up something like that. But an Afghan man living in Oklahoma who allegedly plotted to conduct a terrorist attack on Election Day on behalf of the Islamic State worked a security job for the CIA in Afghanistan, Fox News has learned. Authorities believe Nasser Awad Tawhidi, he, 27 years old, became radicalized after he arrived in the United States. Now, this says authorities believe. You know who the authorities are that believe? The people that were responsible for vetting him. And their vetting failed so horribly, so miserably, now they're going with Plan B, right? Like, it wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald, it was the Cubans, it was the mafia, it was the CIA again. So amazing stuff. So now they're claiming the phony, and this is now it's semi-official because they're anonymous authorities, right? He entered the U.S. on a special immigration visa, which they like to abbreviate as an SIV. It's not just a venereal disease. Now it's a special immigrant visa, and is on parole status, as are, I think, millions at this point, pending adjudication of his immigration proceedings. I think his immigration proceedings should probably come to a screeching halt at this point, don't you think? But now we get to pay to put him in prison for 100 years or for 8 years, and then we'll let him out. Isn't that amazing? So they came in on a special immigrant visa. The Department of Homeland Security said this week those facts were disputed by the State Department. So you got one government agency department telling you one thing and another government department telling you the opposite. Officials have since clarified that Tawhidi came to the U.S. via humanitarian parole and later applied for SIV status. You know, I don't really care about all that. You guys claim that you vetted him, and yet you let him into the country, and I'm glad that the FBI got him. I'm signing the cross because you guys, now humanitarian parole is preceded by, it's a process by which Tawhidi would have been held in a third country for screening and vetting and then flown into the U.S. He didn't even have to walk across the border and give a cartel money or anything like that. After moving to the U.S. in 2021, he applied for a special immigrant status pathway to a green card. You got a green card. Hey, what kind of work do you do? I'm a terrorist. Would you like 72 raisins? Because, all right, now let's go to Alejandro Mayorkas, because yesterday Jackie Heinrich of the Fox News Channel asked Alejandro Mayorkas, who was not in the room, and it was this weird video where Mayorkas' arms were cut off, and there was an angle looking down on him like it was a surveillance camera, and it was lit like he was trying to conceal his identity for a 60 Minutes interview or something. And it went like this with Jackie Heinrich and Alejandro Mayorkas.
Mr. Secretary, it's Jackie Heinrich from Fox. I want to ask you about a different story. This Afghan national who was working for the CIA in Afghanistan was arrested for planning an election day terror plot. He was brought to the U.S. after Afghanistan collapsed. Your agency says as part of the SIV program. The State Department is telling us he was not part of the SIV program, which had strenuous vetting. They say he was never issued an SIV or immigrant visa, and DHS paroled him into the U.S. They further expect court documents to be updated to reflect this from the DOJ side. So, Mr. Secretary, how was this man brought into the U.S.? What screening did he undergo? What did he apply for to get here?
Since you're the head of the Department of Homeland Security, we thought we'd ask you. Now, Fox News says it's still unclear when the State Department approved him for an SIV status after the Department of Homeland Security under Alejandro Mayorkas approved him for humanitarian parole in 2021. And Tawhidi applied for SIV status immediately after arriving in the United States. And the U.S. government is saying there were no red flags that would have barred him from entry to the U.S. I think it's time we review all of the other SIV and everything else, everybody else we let into the country, because when it comes to vetting people, you guys are no good. You see what I'm saying? And Mayorkas is a weasel. So
Jackie,
so this is what he said.
I'm here in North Carolina communicating with the individuals who are still conducting search and rescue operations. Over 200 people have lost their lives in Hurricane Helene. We have reports that at least 10 individuals have lost their lives as a result of Hurricane Milton. I'd be very pleased to answer your question in a different setting, but we're here to talk about emergencies and the support that we can deliver to people in desperate need. Thank you.
So this is a single issue briefing, and I'm not going to talk about the terrorist from Afghanistan who was going to commit a mass murder on Election Day, terrorist attack on behalf of ISIS that we allowed into the country after we claimed we vetted him. So now we've ginned up a new fake story that, oh, he must have gotten radicalized in Oklahoma City because that's where all the radicals come from.
We're getting conflicting answers from your agency and from the State Department about a man who was arrested for an Election Day terror plot. How do you not have those answers prepared?
Jackie, that's not what I said. What I said is I'd be pleased to discuss this issue at a different time, but I am here to speak about disasters that have impacted people's lives in real time, and that is a subject that I am addressing today.
Mr. Secretary, can you assure people that appropriate steps have been taken to secure the country against these kinds of threats? Because the outstanding question is whether this man was radicalized before the U.S. government brought him here or afterward. And people should be concerned about that.
Jackie, your persistence in questioning can be matched by my persistence in answers.
All right, we're going to go. Go ahead, Gabe.
That's it, and that was cringe. All right. Oh, we don't answer questions. Oh, and he didn't say, he said, well, that's not what I said. I do have the answers. I'm just not going to share them with you, is basically what he said, because I'm a fascist and your government doesn't work for the people anymore. It's just a big, bad government. Amazing. And here's what our government is saying. Investigators believe Tawhidi was radicalized after arriving in the U.S. because otherwise they have to take the fall for the vetting process, similar to several past terrorist suspects who are all Muslims who killed in the name of Islam, which I think this is Islamophobic, is what the government is saying here, including those involved in the Pulse nightclub shooting. That was in Florida. The 2015 San Bernardino attack, that was the Christmas party attack, both by Muslim radicals, right? And the Halloween 2017 case in which a man used a truck to murder 8 people and injure several others on a bike path in lower Manhattan on behalf of ISIS. So the government has a story, and they're sticking to it. And the story is, well, you know, they were fine when they got here, and then they got here and they were radicalized. Let's grab a quick call. Let's go to Gino, calling from Tucson, Arizona, all the way to Tacoma, Philadelphia, Atlanta, PA. Gino, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Well, hey, Chris, thanks for taking my call.
Oh, yeah.
I don't normally try because you're a very busy person on the phone. But you said something just a second ago about this gentleman maybe just walking across our southern border, and he would have been in scot-free. And as you just mentioned, I am quite literally right next to the border right here in Tucson. And I just want to know whatever happened to that gentleman that we saw crossing the border on video and in a strong Middle Eastern accent stated that soon you will all know my name.
Oh, that's a fun question. Yeah, I think the government vetted him, and now he's a professor at Columbia University.
Probably two-spirit now, isn't he?
He could be two-spirited and non-binary. That is a good question, Gino. Yeah, what happened to him? We have that. You have that audio right in front of you? Michael already has it right in front of him. Listen to this.
By the way, if you are smart enough, you will know who I am. But you are really not smart enough to know who I am. But soon you're going to know who I am. Very easy.
Wow, very easy. The entitlement.
No, believe me, I'm much better than that.
The entitlement, guys. Wow.
Yeah, pretty. That's the guy you're talking about. Michael Piercy had it at his fingertips there. Keep in mind also that the House of Representatives discovered that there were, 370 people on the terror watch list that have been waved into our country. And it's, Gino, it's almost like they're not on our side and they don't care about our safety. What do you think about that?
Unfortunately, I do believe you might be onto something, sir.
Yeah, I could be. Yeah, our government is not really working for us in the way that they're supposed to be working for us. There's an election coming up. Please vote accordingly.
Jackie, your persistence in questioning can be matched by my persistence in answers.
So the radical Islamic jihadi terrorist waved into the country by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, Tawhidi, is plotting with a minor. Turns out the minor is his brother-in-law. We just let everybody in. His brother-in-law entered the United States in March of 2018. Now, he's still a minor, and he entered in 2018 under a stricter SIV program after he was vetted. That's what the Department of Homeland Security says. After he was vetted. I don't think you guys are, what were we doing yesterday from Princess Bride? This word vetted. I don't think that word means what you would think it means. It's inconceivable, honestly, that you guys call this vetting when we're talking about this plot and the Pulse nightclub and the Christmas party in California and the guy driving the vehicle over everybody in New York. And, I think your vetting process is not up to snuff. Can I just say? Amazing. All right, let's, so Frank wants to, is that right? All right, let's go to Frank calling from Chicago, Illinois, listening on the great WLS. Only got about a minute or so, Frank, but I want to get you in here.
Of course you do. Every time I call, you only give me 30 seconds. But regardless, I just want to see how you have a double standard with this guy right now, with the press conference. He very clearly said, this conference is about the disaster. He said it, right? He's not avoiding any question. He said next time we'll talk about the foil plot, as opposed to Trump.
Next time,
anytime anyone
does he hold press conferences? He doesn't hold press conferences.
He said he's speaking on the behalf of the administration. Is what he's speaking on behalf. Am I wrong?
Yeah, the government. Yeah, the Biden government. Yeah.
Okay, exactly.
So he's not going to take any questions about the terrorist guy who is plotting the massacre on Election Day, and that's okay. That's okay with you.
No, did it happen?
The massacre?
Did it happen? No, it did not happen. They stopped a foil. They stopped the foil plan. Come on now, it didn't happen.
Well, I said I'm going to give the FBI credit where credit is due. You heard me say that too, right?
And then Trump, for example, anytime Trump is asked a question, what is his response when he doesn't want to answer?
He exhausts the press by answering all of their questions.